When was the last time you were truly bored? Not that disguised boredom posing as rest while you scroll through your phone feed, watching videos you don't even really care about, but that real boredom, heavy, uncomfortable, where there's no music playing in the background, no screen flashing in front of you, no one talking in your ear, no easy escape, just you and the silence. Have you stopped to think about why you run from this so much? What is it about this silence that scares you so much that you'll do anything, absolutely anything, to avoid it? Grab your phone for no reason. Turn on the TV to a random channel. Look for someone to talk to even when you have nothing to say. Anything works, as long as it pulls you out of that emptiness. Maybe the answer lies precisely in what appears when everything gets quiet. And maybe that's exactly why you need to be bored from time to time. Boredom bothers you because it reveals everything you've tried to ignore for months, maybe years. It exposes the emptiness left by postponed choices, conversations never had, repressed emotions, abandoned projects, unresolved relationships. It's not a superficial distraction that's missing. It's not entertainment. It's not more content. It's something deeper, more structural, more true. It's as if boredom strips away all the layers of protection you've built over time, one by one, without hurry, without mercy, and leaves you completely naked before yourself. No filter, no excuse, no audience to impress. And that hurts in a way you can't explain. But behind this pain, there's a silent calling, a whisper you've been ignoring for too long. Boredom is just the beginning of the road back to yourself. Think about all the times you picked up your phone just because. There was no notification, no new message, nothing urgent to do. You just didn't want to be alone with your thoughts for a few more seconds. It's impressive how we treat silence as if it were the enemy, as if it were too dangerous to let the mind wander without supervision, without control, without a script. We fill every second with something. Podcast in the car, music while working, series while eating, endless scrolling before bed, as if silence were a black hole that's going to swallow you if you get too close. But what really scares you isn't the silence itself. It's what it brings to the surface. It's what it reveals when you finally stop running. In the silence, exactly what you wanted to avoid appears. Confused thoughts you don't know where they come from. Decisions you've been putting off for weeks, maybe months. Memories that return without permission, without warning, that you swore you'd forgotten. Conversations that were left half-finished because you were afraid to continue. Regrets you swept under the rug thinking they'd disappear on their own. Fears you disguised as rationality. Desires you suffocated because they seemed impossible or inappropriate. It's uncomfortable to be pushed inward this way, without preparation, without warning, without anyone to save you. It's as if the external world finally stops screaming, and now all that's left is you, and everything you didn't want to hear. Everything you didn't have the courage to face. But silence also cleanses. It organizes the chaos. It repositions what was messed up. It returns the direction you were losing while running from one side to the other, without really knowing where you were going or why. Have you noticed how everyone talks about purpose, about authenticity, about living a meaningful life, but nobody truly stops to discover what that means in practice? Everyone wants to find their own path, but nobody slows down enough to realize they might have passed by it several times without noticing. The pause reveals the distance between who you are and who you say you are, between the person you show and the person you hide. That's where the discomfort appears, in that distance. In the difference between intention and practice, between what you say you value and what you actually do day to day, between what you say you want and what you effectively choose. This friction hurts because it forces you to admit the incoherence, but it also reveals forgotten possibilities, projects you dropped midway, conversations you avoided having, changes you know need to happen but you keep pushing off for later. The emptiness creates space to reorganize priorities, to throw away what doesn't matter anymore, to put at the center what really matters. The pause is more an invitation than an interruption, an invitation to return to the essential. The interesting thing about boredom is that it works like an internal lie detector. When you're living aligned with who you really are, boredom rarely appears in that heavy, suffocating way. It can appear as rest, as a natural pause, as a necessary breath. But when boredom arrives heavy, loaded, unbearable, It's because something's wrong in the structure. Something you're doing, or being, or pretending to be, that isn't true. And the body knows. The unconscious mind knows. That's why the discomfort. That's why the restlessness. It's an alarm saying you need to review your choices. There are people who spend their entire lives running from this alarm, moving it to a different address, changing jobs because they think the problem is the work, changing cities because they think the problem is the place, changing relationships because they think the problem is the person. And sometimes it is, sometimes the external change actually solves it. But most of the time, you take the boredom with you. Because boredom isn't in things. It's in you. In how you relate to your own life. In the distance between what you are and what you pretend to be. But you run. You occupy yourself in every possible way. You distract yourself with anything available. You drown yourself in movement so you don't feel the weight of what's inside. You turn on the TV even when you don't want to watch anything. You open your phone even when you have nothing to do. You schedule commitments you didn't even want to have just to fill your calendar. You accept invitations that don't interest you just to not be alone. Anything works, as long as it pulls you out of that emptiness. And it works for a while. The external noise manages to muffle the internal one. The distractions manage to keep you away from yourself. Until it doesn't work anymore. Until the tiredness hits in a way that even coffee can't fix. Until the anxiety tightens in a way that even guided breathing doesn't relieve. Because what is avoided always returns. And it always returns stronger, louder, more urgent, more impossible to ignore. The constant escape only prolongs what already needs to be faced. When you finally remain, when you finally stop running, the pain speaks with clarity, and only clarity allows healing. Because you don't heal what you don't see. You don't resolve what you don't confront. You don't transform what you don't recognize. Boredom interrupts the autopilot. That trance you've been living in for so long that you don't even notice you're in it anymore. You answer, "I'm fine," when someone asks how you are, but you don't even know if you're really fine. You buy the same things at the store every week. You follow the same route to work even when there's traffic. You order the same dish at the same restaurant. Not because you really want to, but because it's automatic. You forget you have a choice, that you can change, that none of this is mandatory. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. Without questioning, without truly feeling, just executing commands you don't even remember programming. Boredom tears through this routine like tearing paper. It shows the repeated life you lead without realizing it. This shock feels like loss at first. Like something went wrong. Like you're ruining your own life by questioning what always worked. But it's not that. It's not loss. It's revelation. It's the chance to realize what became too mechanical. What you do without thinking. What you accept without liking. What you carry without needing. From this rupture comes the opportunity to change course. To create new paths. To truly choose. There's a type of discomfort you feel and immediately think something's broken in you. That you're not functioning properly. That you need to fix something urgently. You look for what's wrong. You investigate symptoms. You compare your life to others. You try to figure out where you failed. But it's not always that. Not always does discomfort mean defect. The discomfort doesn't mean you're broken. Often it means you're saturated. You feel something doesn't fit because you're already beyond your emotional limit. Already beyond your capacity to carry. You've been carrying too much weight for too long. Responsibilities that aren't yours. Expectations you didn't create. Demands that don't make sense. And this discomfort you feel isn't a sign of weakness. It's just a request for pause. A clear, direct, urgent request. A request you ignore because you think stopping is failure. Because you learned that resting is laziness. That slowing down is giving up. But attending to this request returns balance. Because body and mind weren't made to function without rest. Nothing was made for that. And when you finally stop, you realize the problem was never you. It was how much you were carrying. When everything gets quiet, you reunite with forgotten emotions. Feelings you locked away in some corner of your mind thinking they'd disappear with time. But they didn't disappear. They stayed there, accumulating, growing, taking up space. And when you finally create silence, they all arrive at once. Tiredness you ignored, because you had bills to pay. Longing you repressed because it hurt too much to feel. Frustration you disguised as patience. Anger you transformed into politeness. Desire you stifled because it seemed forbidden, inappropriate, or impossible. It's heavy, yes. It's difficult. It's painful. But it's real. It's true. It's yours. And nothing heals what you refuse to feel. Nothing transforms while you pretend it's not there. By allowing the pain, by giving it space to exist, you free up space for the new. Because while you hold everything inside, locked up, repressed, denied, there's no space for anything else. Not for true joy, not for genuine hope, not for real change. Feeling isn't weakness, it's courage. It's the first step toward any transformation. There's a type of tiredness that even sleeping doesn't fix. You can sleep 8, 10, 12 hours and still wake up exhausted. A silent exhaustion born from excessive demand and lack of meaning. From living a life that doesn't belong to you. From following rules you didn't choose. From carrying expectations that aren't yours. You wake up tired. You drag your body to the shower. You drink coffee without tasting it. You go to work like you're going to war. You spend the whole day tired. You get home and don't have energy even to talk. You go to sleep tired. And you don't understand why. Because physically you're fine. You eat right. You drink water. You try to take care of yourself. But you're still exhausted. Because it's not the body that's tired. It's the soul. It's that part of you that knows something isn't right. That feels the misalignment. That perceives the incoherence. This tiredness knocks you down to force you to reorganize your life. It forces you to admit what doesn't work anymore. The work that doesn't make sense. The relationship that doesn't nourish you. The routine that doesn't represent you. And from this admission, a new strength is born. Not the strength to endure more, but the strength to truly change. That strength that comes from aligned choices, from clear priorities, from a life that finally makes sense. If you're enjoying this content, maybe you'll also like our exclusive material that's in the first pinned comment. There's a huge difference between being busy and being present. You can be extremely busy and completely absent from your own life. You can be doing millions of things and not really be there in any of them. Boredom exposes precisely that. It shows when you're on autopilot, when you're executing tasks without inhabiting your own existence. And that's scary because it makes you realize how much life you're losing while you're alive. Modern culture has a serious problem with boredom. It turned it into enemy number one. It created millions of ways to avoid it. Infinite apps, endless series, constant notifications, everything designed so you never, ever, under any circumstances, get bored. And it works. You really don't get bored anymore in the classic sense. But you also don't stay with yourself anymore. You also don't stay whole anymore. You also don't stay present anymore. Because presence requires emptiness. It requires space. It requires silence. And that modern culture doesn't offer. In fact, modern culture offers precisely the opposite. It gives you artificial fullness, a sensation of filling that fills nothing. You can spend the whole day consuming content and end up empty, because none of that created space for you to exist. None of that allowed you to find yourself. It was just noise, just distraction, just escape. And at the end of the day, you're still there, alone with yourself, with everything you tried to avoid all day long. Capitalism discovered that anxiety sells. That dissatisfaction generates consumption. That restlessness moves the market. So it created an entire system based on never leaving you in peace. There's always something new to buy. There's always a new goal to achieve. There's always a better version of yourself to become. And you run, you consume, you change, but you never arrive. Because the system wasn't made for you to arrive. It was made for you to keep running. And boredom is revolutionary precisely because it takes you out of that race. It forces you to stop, to question, to realize that maybe you don't need all of this, that maybe you're already enough, that maybe life doesn't need to be a constant chase for more and better, that maybe being quiet is also being alive. And that's dangerous for a system that depends on your dissatisfaction. When you get bored, it's not lack of stimulation. It's not because the world became dull. It's not because you need more content, more fun, more novelty. It's excess. It's the opposite. Boredom reveals that you got lost in the rush, in the packed schedule, in the accelerated autopilot, in the endless hustle, that you became hostage to speed. It's the body saying it can't take living like this anymore, that it can't take running anymore, that it can't take producing anymore, that it can't take performing anymore, that it needs rhythm, that it needs space, that it needs silence, that it needs time without utility, without objective, without measurable result. Boredom slows down what was already unsustainable. It forces you to decrease the pace, because you've already passed the limit a long time ago. And in the slower rhythm, you start breathing for real again. You start noticing the things around you again. You start feeling your own body again. You start hearing your own thoughts again. You start existing instead of just functioning. The worst feeling isn't failure. It's not losing. It's not making mistakes. The worst feeling is realizing that nothing you do represents you, that you're living a borrowed life, following scripts that aren't yours, fulfilling expectations you don't even agree with, building things that don't matter to you, saying words you don't feel, being someone you don't recognize. The emptiness of boredom exposes this absence of true creation, this lack of authorship in your own life, and that hurts like few things hurt. Because it's the pain of looking at your own life and not recognizing yourself in it, of realizing you became a character in other people's lives, that you're living for others, through others, according to others. But this emptiness also points to where you need to go. It's not there just to hurt. It's there to show the way. It returns to you the desire to build something that's truly yours, something that carries your mark, your essence, your truth. Something that, when you look at it, you can say with certainty, this is me. This came from me. This represents me. Silence removes excuses, noise, and distractions. It removes everything you use to hide from yourself. It leaves just you, your fear, and your truth. Naked, raw, unfiltered. It's an unavoidable confrontation, but deeply transformative. You can't run anymore. You can't make up excuses anymore. You can't lie to yourself anymore, because there's no one to convince. No audience to impress, no judge to deceive, just you and the mirror. Just you and the reality of what you really are, what you really feel, what you really want. And in this confrontation, something transformative happens. The masks fall one by one, the defenses dissolve, the truth emerges raw and clear. You can't lie to yourself when everything gets quiet. The excuses don't stick anymore. The justifications don't make sense. The rationalizations don't convince. And from this brutal honesty, a more aligned life is born. More true, more whole. Because when you stop deceiving yourself, you finally manage to move in the right direction. In your direction. Not in the direction they taught you. Not in the direction they expect from you, but in yours. It's curious how we learn from early on to fear our own interior, as if there were a monster inside waiting to devour you, as if your thoughts were too dangerous to be thought, as if your feelings were too destructive to be felt. And then you spend years building walls, barriers, extremely elaborate defense systems, all to not have to look inside, to not have to feel what's there. But what you discover when you finally look isn't a monster. It's you, scared, tired, alone, needing care. And realizing that changes everything. Boredom teaches you something that productivity will never teach. It teaches you that you don't need to be useful all the time to have value. That you don't need to be constantly producing to deserve to exist. That your value isn't in what you do, but in who you are. And that goes against everything they taught you. It goes against all the logic of the modern world. But it's true. You're valuable because you exist. Not because you produce. Not because you perform. Not because you deliver results. But simply because you're human. And humans need useless time. They need moments without objective. They need hours without measurable result. Solitude scares because it forces you to be your own company. And if you don't like yourself very much, that's a problem. If you spend your entire life running from who you are, meeting yourself in silence is painful. That's why so many people avoid it. That's why so many people fill every second. It's not fear of silence. It's fear of who appears in the silence. But the only way to make peace with yourself is to spend time with yourself. There's no shortcut. There's no substitute. There's no way to outsource this work. It's you and you. And the more you run, the harder it gets. The world demands constant presence from you, immediate response, continuous exposure. You have to always be available for everyone, always connected, always answering messages, always posting, always showing you're alive, that you're producing, that you're enjoying life, as if existing meant being seen, as if value depended on visibility. And in this excess of communication, in this pressure to always be present, always available, always exposed, you lose yourself. You talk so much you don't hear what you feel. You give so many opinions you forget what you really think. You share so much you don't have anything just for yourself anymore. You become too public and too little private. You become performance. You become content. You stop being a person. Withdrawal returns lucidity, returns clarity, returns contact with what's real. And silence protects what's essential. It protects what needs to be cared for in secret, what needs time to mature, what dies when it's exposed too early. Society makes you believe that silence is a defect, that thinking before speaking is a problem, that needing solitude is weakness. You grow up hearing you need to be more outgoing, more talkative, more sociable, more present, as if introspection were synonymous with inadequacy, as if reflecting before acting were hesitation, as if needing time alone were pathological isolation. They teach you from early on that whoever talks more is worth more, that whoever appears more matters more, that whoever socializes more is doing better. But you're not inadequate. You don't have a defect. You don't need correction. You're just made of depth. And depth needs space. It needs time. It needs silence. It needs solitude. Not solitude as abandonment, but solitude as encounter. Encounter with yourself. There's nothing wrong with needing to be alone to understand yourself. This isn't escape from reality. This isn't a social problem. This is care. This is necessity. This is respect for your own nature. When you stop, strange thoughts and old memories emerge. Things you thought you'd overcome years ago. Situations you thought you'd completely forgotten. People you swore you'd left in the past. Emotions you were certain you'd processed. Everything comes back. Not in an organized way. Not in a gentle way, but in a chaotic, intense, confused way. This scares because it seems like regression. Like you're going backward. Like all the progress you made was an illusion. Like you haven't evolved at all. But it's not that. It's not regression. It's just what you repressed coming back to be integrated. To be finally seen. Finally felt. Finally truly processed. Nothing disappears simply because you ignore it. Nothing vanishes just because you bury it. Everything stays stored somewhere inside you. In the body. In memory. In the unconscious. Waiting for the moment it can safely emerge. And when you finally create space, when you finally offer silence, all of this comes to the surface. Boredom brings to light what needs to be cared for. And caring isn't erasing. It's not forgetting. It's not pretending it never happened. Caring is looking. It's recognizing. It's accepting. It's integrating. The problem is, we learn to fear our own shadows. We learn there are parts of us that are unacceptable, that can't be seen, that can't be felt, that need to be hidden at all costs. And then you spend your entire life running from these parts, denying, repressing, projecting onto others. But they don't disappear. They just get stronger in the darkness, more distorted, more frightening. And the more you run, the more power they gain over you. Boredom forces you to stop running. It forces you to look at these parts you've been avoiding. And what you discover is surprising. They're not as scary as you imagined. They're just parts of you that needed attention, validation, integration. And when you finally give that to them, when you finally accept they exist and are part of who you are, something magical happens. They stop controlling you. They stop sabotaging your life. They integrate, and you become more whole. You try to always be pleasant, always correct, always impeccable, always the person who doesn't bother anyone. Because you learned from early on that being accepted depends on it, that love is conditional, that respect needs to be earned through perfection. But this performance wears you down deeply and distances you from your own essence. You spend so much time trying to be what others expect that you completely forget who you really are. You swallow anger to seem polite. You suffocate opinion to seem friendly. You deny desire to seem appropriate. You hide fear to seem strong. And in the end, you're all of this you built, but you're not yourself anymore. Boredom dismantles this mask because it leaves you with no role to play. There's no audience. There's no stage. There's no script. There's no character to maintain. And when you stop acting, when you finally take off the costume, you start truly existing. The solution is simpler than it seems. Being real is less tiring than being perfect. Being honest consumes less energy than being pleasant. Being you, with everything that includes, is infinitely more sustainable than being who they expect you to be. Without distractions, you realize how many empty opinions you carried. How many things you said just because you heard someone say them one day. How many ideas you defended just because it was expected in your social circle. How many convictions you pretended to have just to belong. It's uncomfortable to admit that much of what you said wasn't yours, that you were living in the echo of other voices, repeating ready-made phrases, reproducing others' thoughts, defending positions you didn't even understand well. This recognition hurts because it shows you how empty you were inside, how much you were shell without content, appearance without substance. But it's liberating too, because from the moment you realize this, that you recognize your own superficiality, you can start building something true, something that comes from within, something that's genuinely yours. Silence returns authenticity to you. It returns the chance to stop reproducing and start creating. And from there, your voice finally starts being born. Not the voice that imitates, not the voice that repeats, not the voice that pleases, but the voice that is. Your voice. When you finally develop your own voice, everything changes. Not because you become someone extraordinary, but because you finally become you. And there's a deep peace in that. A peace that doesn't come from external conquest, doesn't come from social approval, doesn't come from any metric. It comes from internal coherence, from alignment, from integrity in the most literal sense of the word. Being whole, not fragmented, not divided, not pretending to be several different versions depending on the context. Most people live in pieces. They have the work version, the family version, the friends version, the social media version. And none of these versions is completely false. But also none is completely true. They're cutouts, edits, performances. At work, you're serious and professional. You hide that you're tired. With family, you're strong and responsible. You hide that you're confused. With friends, you're relaxed and well-adjusted. You hide that you're afraid. On social media, you're inspiring and accomplished. You hide that you're lost. And keeping all these versions functioning at the same time is exhausting. That's why you get home and don't want to see anyone, don't want to talk to anyone, don't want to be anyone. Because you spent the whole day being versions of yourself, and now you need time to go back to being you for real. Boredom forces you to integrate these versions. When you're alone in silence, there's no version to perform. There's no context to adapt to. There's no expectation to meet. You just are. And at first this is confusing because you don't know anymore who you are when you're not being for someone. You don't know anymore what you want when you're not wanting to impress. You don't know anymore what you feel when you're not feeling to fit in. But gradually, a more true version starts to emerge. A version that doesn't change depending on who's looking. And that's the version you need to know. You try to control everything, predict everything, control everything, plan every detail, anticipate every problem, eliminate every risk. Because you believe security comes from absolute control. That being prepared for everything means being protected from everything. But boredom puts you before the mystery of life, before the unknown, before the unpredictable, before everything you can't control no matter how hard you try. It's deeply uncomfortable not knowing the next step, not having all the answers, not having the whole path mapped out, not knowing what comes next. Living in uncertainty goes against everything they taught you about success and security. But it's precisely in this not knowing that new possibilities emerge. When you let go of control, when you accept you can't control everything, life finally manages to surprise you. It manages to take you to places you never planned. It manages to show you paths you never imagined. Accepting the mystery frees you. because you stop carrying the impossible weight of having to know everything all the time, of having to predict everything, of having to control everything. You can finally relax and trust the process. There's a subtle arrogance in thinking you can control life, as if the universe needed your permission to happen, as if things could only unfold the way you planned. But life doesn't work that way. It has its own timing, its own logic, its own wisdom that's often much greater than yours. And when you finally let go, when you finally accept there are things that completely escape your control, you discover something incredible. Life knows what it's doing, even when you don't know. Boredom also teaches you about temporality, about the fact that some things need time. Not rushed time, hurried time, measured in productivity, but still time. Empty time. Time with no apparent function, like a seed that needs to stay under the ground in the dark before sprouting. You don't see anything happening. It seems like nothing's changing. It seems like you're wasting time. But down there, where you can't see, something's transforming. Roots are growing. Structure is forming. Strength is accumulating. And when it finally sprouts, when it finally appears, it's strong. It's true. It's sustainable. The culture of speed made you forget this. It made you believe everything needs to be fast, that if you're not seeing immediate results, you're wasting time. That efficiency is doing more in less time. But some of the most important things in life can't be accelerated. Healing can't be accelerated. Grief can't be accelerated. Self-knowledge can't be accelerated. Real transformation can't be accelerated. These things have their own rhythm. And trying to force this rhythm only delays the process. When everything is suspended, when life stops running, something inside starts moving. Boredom provokes an internal collapse that precedes real change. It dismantles you piece by piece to then reorganize you in a better way. It's as if you needed to come undone a little to be able to remake yourself in a more true form. Unlearn to relearn. Deconstruct to reconstruct. Die a little to be reborn different. And when you cross through this emptiness, when you survive this discomfort without running, you come back different. Not superficially different, but structurally different. More whole because you stopped denying parts of yourself. More honest because you stopped lying to yourself. More you because you stopped trying to be someone else. Boredom isn't the end of anything. It's the beginning of a new version of you. A version that's not afraid to be alone. That doesn't need constant noise to exist. That doesn't depend on external validation to feel real. That knows silence isn't emptiness, it's fullness. That understands the pause isn't a waste of time, it's recovery of yourself. The most interesting thing about this transformation is that it doesn't happen all at once. It's not like waking up one day completely different. It's a slow, gradual, almost imperceptible process. You start noticing small changes. A conversation you don't accept having anymore. A commitment you don't force yourself to keep anymore. An opinion you don't pretend to agree with anymore. An emotion you don't repress anymore. They're small details, but they accumulate. And one day you look back and realize you're living a completely different life. Not because you changed everything at once, but because you changed a little bit every day. And that's the beauty of boredom when you stop fighting against it. It doesn't transform you instantly. It gives you space to transform yourself. It creates the conditions for change to happen organically, without force, without pressure, without violence. Just letting what needs to die, die. And letting what needs to be born. At the right time, in the right way, at the right moment. There's a huge difference between forced change and organic transformation. Forced change is when you decide to be different and force yourself to act different. You wake up one day and decide you're going to wake up at 5 in the morning, meditate for an hour, read 30 pages, and work out every day. You create rigid rules. You establish ambitious goals. You demand from yourself without mercy. And it works for a while. A week, maybe 2. Until you get tired. Until life happens. Until you go back to what you always were. Because you didn't truly change. You just changed the behavior. But organic transformation is different. It happens from the inside out. You don't need to force yourself because you genuinely changed. You don't wake up at 5 because you obligated yourself. You wake up because sleeping later doesn't make sense anymore for who you've become. What you were doesn't fit anymore. What you did doesn't make sense anymore. And then the change is natural. It's sustainable. It's real. Boredom allows organic transformation because it doesn't force you to do anything. It just shows you what no longer serves. And when you see clearly what doesn't serve, you naturally let go. You don't need willpower. You don't need heroic discipline. You just need to see the truth. And the truth sets you free. It always has. It always will. So maybe the question isn't why you get bored. Maybe the question is why you run from it so much. Why you're so afraid of being alone with yourself. Why silence terrifies you so much. Boredom isn't your enemy. It never was. It's your most honest teacher. It teaches you to be with yourself without distractions. It teaches you to hear what really matters instead of all the noise around you. It teaches you that not everything needs to be filled, occupied, utilized, turned into content. That emptiness also has an essential function. That the pause is also movement. That rest is also productive, just in a way that doesn't show up in any metric. Because in the end, you're not what you produce. You're not your list of achievements. You're not your resume. You're not your followers. You're not your likes. You're not your performance. You are what happens in the silence. What emerges when everything stops. What remains when everything superficial dissolves. And this part of you, this essential part, only appears in boredom. Only appears in the pause. Only appears when you stop doing and start being. Next time boredom arrives, don't run. Don't grab your phone. Don't turn on the TV. Stay. Let it show you what you need to see. Because deep down, you already know. Boredom doesn't bring anything new. It just brings back what was always there inside, waiting for you to have the courage to look. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. That really helps the channel grow and continue bringing this type of reflection to you.